I am Joan, your freaky philosopher. You are my absolute reason. And let's get going with this practical application of dialectic in our pursuit to further understand gender ideology. In the interview with Jordan Peterson, I had a close look at Chloe Cole's answers at the beginning of the interview. And the reason for that was to try and identify the first couple of reasons that triggered this individual to further pursue the gender dysphoria aspect of what she thought she was experiencing. Throughout the interview, Chloe Cole points to about 9 different relativities that ultimately supported and encouraged her to further explore the road to changing her gender from female to male. The 9 relativities described throughout the interview was that she was a tomboy growing up and that she fit in more with the boys. She went through puberty at the age of 9, which she describes as being really difficult. When she could no longer physically compete with the boys, she became distressed. And at puberty, all negative emotions in general go up, like depression and anxiousness. She had an increased self-consciousness on her physical appearance. And as she got older, the social discussions became far more sexually orientated, placing her focus even more on her physical sex. Chloe experienced loneliness, and she grew up in a body image orientated society where she was told that her body is a problem, a negative aspect of who she was. Are any of us surprised that Chloe at the end of the day looked at her body and thought that it wasn't at all as what she expected it to be? So let us further explore these 9 supporting relativities that Chloe Cole pointed to through the process of dialectic, in order for us to maybe gain some insight as to what subtle aspects, thoughts, emotions and observations supported Chloe Cole to further pursue a change in gender. I will be going through each one of these 9 relativities pointed to by Chloe Cole and further explore the more subtle aspects of her comments through the process of dialectic. In doing so, I will also bring in the relativity of my own childhood as an individual who most certainly would have fallen victim to the gender ideology out in the environment at the moment, as I was a complete tomboy for most of my life, and it was only in the latter stage of my life, i.e. it was around my 30s, where I began to embrace the more feminine aspects of who I am today. And who I am today is an individual who is as comfortable in a dress and high heels as I am in my jeans and my boots climbing trees. The first relativity we will start with is that Chloe pointed to the fact that she was a tomboy growing up and that she would fit in more with the boys. This points to our playtime as children. And what I would love to ask Chloe is, what about playing with the boys do you enjoy? I can tell you, when I look at my own childhood and playing around as I did with boys, I enjoyed pointing and shooting at things. I enjoyed kicking balls. I enjoyed playing rough with my cousins. At no point, however, did I think or even consider my physical sex as a female. The only time that topic came up in my perspective and my relativities when it came to considering choices was when an adult would point to me and say that I am too tomboyish and I should wear more dresses. Again, I was not the confused one. I was not the one pointing to my physical sex either. It was a confused adult doing so. The second relativity Chloe points to is that she went through puberty at age 9, which she describes as being really difficult. This points to perpetual change and the ability of the individual to be able to adapt to change. I would most certainly be asking Chloe what tools she was given to be able to adapt to the perpetual change that is life. Or is the only tool we give our children the tool of force and control, which ultimately will lead to a child chopping off her tits? On we go to number 3 and 4. Chloe says when she could no longer physically compete with the boys, she became distressed. Does this not point to the subtle influence of empowerment? And is physical strength then the only type of strength available to the individual? And remember, you are speaking to a former female rugby player who started playing rugby when it wasn't a cool thing to do, when it wasn't cool for a woman to be lifting weights with bodybuilders 4 to 6 times a week, when it wasn't cool for a woman to be running around on a rugby field tackling each other into oblivion. It is a full-blown contact sport. So I understand the importance of physical strength. But go ask any rugby player, and every single professional player will tell you physical strength is secondary to character strength. Where is that? Where do we teach our children that strength is not just physical muscular strength, but that it stirs from deep within and it rises and expresses through our muscles, through our physical expression, and through our voices? As you can hear, I'm getting quite enthusiastic right now. Let's go on to point number 4. It was at the fourth relativity that we observed that during puberty, negative emotions like depression and anxiousness are increased. Again, I am back at our ability to adapt. But because we are now pointing to more subtle aspects, emotional aspects, the question placed is, do you have any thoughts about your spiritual aspects? And this is where we get to the spiritual evolution of the individual. As much as I give kudos to you as a parent and your life experience that has provided you with insights and wisdom to assist and help your child, I am also very much aware of my spiritual evolution. And this is where, just for a moment, suspend all that it is you think you know and just consider the possibility of past lives. When you bring in a past life as a relativity for consideration, you begin to understand that although in this physical expression, because of my age, I have gained insight and wisdom with regards to this physical experience, our children re-enter this physical experience with greater insight on the spiritual aspects of who we are as individuals. The next relativity pointed to is an increased self-consciousness on physical appearance. My question here is, what relativities do you use in comparison to your own body image? Is it only Kim Kardashian's voluptuous booty? Or are we taking the time to educate our children in our spiritual aspects of who we are as individuals? If we do so, at least then we can also depend and count on the fact that when our children compare who they are now with what is happening in the outside world, that they include a comparison with what is happening within them, their own spiritual progress and stability is then also taken into consideration. Speaking of fake ass Kim Kardashian, let us move on to the next relativity. Chloe points to that as she got older, the social discussions became more sexually orientated. But we all, especially when we are children, we all talk a whole lot of nonsense and hocus pocus. We think we know when we do not really know. So how will your child be able to tell real from the unreal? The next relativity Chloe mentions is that she often felt incredibly lonely. And this points to acceptance of self. If we are able to fall still and be comfortable within who we are as individuals, then the loneliness aspect begins to fall away. You begin to realize that you are never alone within the oneness of all. But unless we actually begin to teach our children what it means to fall still and to become aware of your feet on the ground, the air running over your skin, or the breath moving in and out through your being, unless we actually educate our children what it means to be within this body and to experience this life, loneliness will pop in and out of their days like it does with yours. Last but not least, Chloe points to the fact that she felt that her body wasn't what she expected at 12. And this points to that eternal kink in our perception. And that is the Newtonian kink of believing that everything that is good can only come from force and control. And that force and control is directed and determined by my fixed desire for a specific outcome. But how often do your plans or the plans of others actually work out exactly to forecast, irrelevant of the amount of force and control applied? It is very seldom that things go exactly according to plan. In fact, I would say it's more of a matter that it never goes according to plan. And this is perhaps not a point of failure with regards to humanity, that we are just incapable of completing any type of plan effectively. Each and every single human being on this planet is incapable of actualizing a fixed outcome. Are we that pathetic? Or is it perhaps, just perhaps, in the sacred space between parts where we suspend all that it is we think we know, Is it just perhaps that the Newtonian approach of force and control is a terrible idea, and that when we begin to study nature around us, we begin to realize it is more about coordination and cooperation that brings about success rather than domination? From this practical application of dialectic and the questions I placed, it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to note that I believe spiritual science is the key to bring wisdom to the chaos that is gender ideology. Because I so closely relate to the little tomboy girls out there who are now at the age of 12 considering whether or not they should cut their tits off. Because I so closely relate to that type of individual, I had to look back and reflect on my own personal life and upbringing to try and gauge what the difference was in my life that prevented me or guarded me against this type of severe force and control action towards a desired outcome. Of course, it is easy to point to the influences of social media as one of the greatest causes of this effect. But that is a low-hanging fruit and almost a no-shit Sherlock type of scenario. I am far more interested in what exactly guarded and guided and protected me as a child when it came to the perception of self. And I had to acknowledge the vital and incredible influence that religion played in my life. It was religion that, in a very subtle and gentle way, shaped and formed my subtle senses to be able to perceive realities that are not outside of myself, but rather within me. It was through the stories of the wise King Solomon, or the strong Samson, or David and Goliath that taught me to reach for the strength I could find within me. These stories and the religious aspects that they stir within the individual is exactly what I would gauge as being the missing link when it comes to children wanting to force and control a particular outcome when it comes to their bodies. But it is this very observation of the pinnacle role religion had with me as an individual throughout my childhood that I also have to step in and say, you are speaking to the same individual who at the age of 7 began to question the Bible school teacher about what exactly was so wrong with knowing the difference between good and evil. The story of Adam and Eve, where it was the tree of good and evil, the fruit and the power of discrimination that I was questioning at the age of 7. This very spectacular question I had at the age of 7 with regards to the power of discrimination is not necessarily because I'm such a special little girl. No, but more so it points to spiritual evolution again. It is the same reason why we look at our children and think, oh my Lord, you have taught me so much. Our children end up teaching us because spiritually they are more evolved than us. It is karma. This is a past life cycle that is an alternating current with the human soul. It is with the additional relativity of past lives and so spiritual evolution that more insight is gained as to what the influences are with our children. Subtle influences that seem to be perverted as it gets more expressed into the world of matter. If we consider spiritual evolution as a fundamental factor, we can begin to ask, well, is my child then not just beginning to relate to their own physical expression in a more subtle way, where the masculine and the feminine are not strictly compartmentalized, but internally far more fluid than any of us, the parents, the older generations, may have ever considered. If you begin to observe that as a potential influencer, even an indicator of spiritual evolution, then you can begin to consider that perhaps what the only thing that is falling short in this education and guidance that we want to provide our children is a proper spiritual structure from which they can further explore both themselves, the inner cosmos, and what is outside of themselves. It is exactly at this point where the need for spiritual structure comes into consideration, and where my duty and calling as teacher of spiritual structure kicks into overdrive. Spiritual science, however, the Vedic science of self, is not a religion. It is with spiritual evolution that I, as an individual, abandoned religion at the age of 16. I did so because at the age of 16, I was being told by religion that I have devils and demons within me just because I love a woman. Obviously, my bullshit detector went off, and I realized that if this religion pocket is wrong about this, something I know for a fact is not of the devil, then they must be wrong about other things, and I should separate myself from it. I should abandon myself from it, and then pursue spiritual insight from whatever sources may present themselves. This is a critical observation, and it is because of spiritual evolution that you cannot go to your child and try and convince them that they have devils and demons within them because they feel fluid between their masculine and their feminine. It won't do the job. What your child is seeking, what their spirit is longing for, but unable to formulate within words, is a spiritual structure. They want to know how they are put together. And once they understand that, they are self-determined and self-empowered individuals to go and adapt to the perpetual change that is life. Shoo-wee, I'm sure I'm not the only one who needs a cup of tea right now. Part 6 was a lot. It was heavy and dense with information. So let's take a moment just to reflect and recover, have a cup of tea, and come back for Part 7. Part 7 will be a revelation of how the oneness of all is ordered within the individual. And thank goodness for all of us, I think in pictures. So it's not a lot of reading, but more so a picture that will give you an impression that is unique and revolutionary, because there is nothing like it out there. You may find pockets of these information here and there. Religions have this information within them. But the way I have gone to investigate and put it all together into a pretty little picture to which we can all relate and from which we can all grow, well, that is incredibly unique. And I'm very excited to show you, but I really need a timeout. That was heavy for me. So I'm going to go have my cup of tea. I am Joan, your freaky philosopher. By now you realize that is not nonsense. I am a whole lot of freakier for you. But you are my absolute reason.